Boris Johnson said that Vladimir Putin threatened to blow him up, saying it would only take a minute. How should we take Putin's threats?
Well, obviously there seems to be a dispute about what was said, but obviously you have to take them seriously, because he obviously said for many, many months that he had no intention of invading Ukraine, that the manoeuvres on the border of Ukraine were not a precursor to military action, and then of course we all know what happened. So you can't afford to kind of sit there and say whatever he said doesn't mean very much, but obviously you have to assess the veracity of what he says and how serious is it. It seems to me that we'd have to ask whether Boris's security was massively heightened as a result of that conversation, and if it wasn't, it suggests to me that at the time it wasn't taken very seriously. Otherwise, the British security services, the police, etc., would have massively strengthened Boris's security. I suspect that it wasn't taken very seriously. I may be wrong.
What do you think?
Interesting. I think was it the case that Boris said that Putin had told him, "I don't want to hurt you, but it'll only take a minute with a missile."
Yeah.
With Boris, you've got to take what he says with a pinch of salt. I'm not saying it's not true he said it, but was Boris on Fox News in the US when he was saying it or something? I think
he was he was doing a BBC,
BBC,
part of a BBC documentary.
But yeah, clearly, if Russia, if the UK thought there was a serious threat of Russia sending missiles anywhere here, be it the Prime Minister or anywhere else, that would be national security, like I've been saying. So I don't know how it was said, whether Putin was saying it sort of in jest or seriousness, but I don't think that's the crux of the matter, really. The point is obviously the barbaric atrocities that are being committed by the Russian army in Ukraine. I think that's more concerning, and in that, Boris was front and centre of mobilising.
He is still.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like you say, he's been there recently as well, of mobilising, the world to supply Ukraine with weaponry and assistance.
Yeah, I mean, Vladimir Putin's office did say it was completely false. Whether
Who do you believe, Vladimir Putin or Boris Johnson?
Well,
I'm afraid it's not easy to answer that question. No, but the serious point that was made by David is that it's true that the bigger issue is what's happening in Ukraine, the behaviour of Putin. It's a totally unacceptable, unjustifiable. The world has, to some extent, come together and supported the Ukrainians. But also, David's right as well in saying that Boris does deserve credit for, from the very early stages of the conflict, being absolutely clear where we should stand. Lessons of history. If you don't stand up to a tyrant, if you show any weakness, if you give that tyrant any sense of legitimacy, you're asking for all sorts of trouble, not only with that individual, but with other tyrants in other parts of the world. So there is a very complex history that Ukraine has, and I hear some people saying, by the way, sometimes in the Jewish community, that they were very cruel, and some Ukrainians were very cruel during the war, etc. So whose side should we be on? I think it's absolutely clear. First of all, you can't blame this generation for the behaviour of 2 generations ago, and secondly, what he is doing is totally without justification. The thousands of civilians who've been killed, the tens of thousands of civilians that have been displaced, the cruelty that's been demonstrated, there's got to be a zero tolerance, and it's got to be made very, very clear that it's unacceptable. So if we're talking about Boris and threats to him, he's writing a book, isn't he, about his time in Downing Street. This will no doubt help sell the book a little bit, this sort of comment. But he does deserve credit, actually, for the leadership he's shown and did show at the beginning of the Ukraine crisis.